Hello and welcome back to Troy Story, a podcast for the Collar City where we explore the history and people of Troy, New York, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, John Salka. This is Chapter 12, Episode 20. I'm very excited to premiere Part 2 of our series looking back at Metallica's sold-out show at the RPI Field House on March 15th, 1989. This time, we're joined by Kevin O'Connell, who was just 14 years old when he saw Metallica that night in the Collar City. During our conversation, we discussed the era of heavy metal in the 1980s, the evolution of Metallica's stage production during the Damaged Justice tour, the atmosphere in the arena that night, and explore some YouTube comments left by fans and fellow concert attendees. Kevin also revisits other concerts he's seen over the years, including Bon Jovi and Cinderella at the Field House, and some scary moments during Metallica's set at Woodstock, '94. We taped this episode shortly before Kevin's 50th birthday, so this is a belated celebration to him as we air this episode. Let's jump right in. So you were at Metallica concert at what would be the RPI Field House.
I was there, and I didn't realize at the time that it would be such a significant event, and I'd be talking about it this many years later. I thought we'd be talking about it the next day, maybe a couple of weeks from then, but not. What has it been? I didn't even. I lost track of the years. How many years was that?
So this would have been was 19. Excuse me. It would have been 1989. Excuse me, 1989.
Yes.
So it would.
Yes, March 15th. Before I hopped on here with you, I said maybe I'll just Google this and see what comes up if you put in RPI Field House, and the whole concert is actually on. You can watch the whole thing.
Isn't that wild? I mean, from a standpoint of the show being there at the time, 1989, the concept of being able to relive a concert like that, at best, you would hope maybe someone would either record it with a tape or
Right.
someone would film it with what would be a camcorder.
Camcorder, right. Yep.
Back then, how wild is it that you can go back and see that whole show however many years ago? Now it's later. 1989, 99, 2009, 19, it'd be 35 years, give or take.
Yes, which makes me feel pretty old because, and I don't feel old at all. I feel young, but I'm going to turn 50 this year, and I still listen to that. I still listen to that music and a lot of other music. But I think that, like I said, I had no idea how significant it would be. It was just kind of like, let's go to this concert, it was, and they really turned into something amazing to still be doing this that many years later, and to the crowds that come to show up to see them. It's crazy, isn't it? It really is amazing. And I, like I said, I didn't think it would be that big of a deal at the time. But yeah, if you look back, if you go on Google, you can see even on their website, they have their set list from that night of what they played, So, but I remember it was a big deal because I think the field house was sold out, and you had to get there early. But I didn't remember like things from the show because it was so long ago. But I remember about that time frame. I think what was significant to me was that I was young. I was like 14 years old or something, I think, at the time when I went to see it, and heavy metal was really popular, like the Billboard charts. I'm kind of into music, and I look at the Billboard charts now and see like all the top songs, and they're all, mostly like hip hop or R&B type music. And back then it was not like that. And it really wasn't that long ago. I feel like I remember being younger, my parents talking about the music you kids listen to is crazy. And now I'm like that person, But the charts, the Billboard charts back then in the 80s and 90s were, heavy metal bands or rock bands, and once in a while, like, it's funny because last night here in Albany, I went to see down at the Plaza. They have free concerts on Wednesdays or Thursday nights, and they had Rob Bass last night. And I'm not trying to get too far off topic of the concert, but that's what I remember changing like the Billboard charts when that It Takes Two song came out. Like that's when it started to make the shift from like heavy metal over to that genre of music. And now the Billboard charts seem to be ruled by that music. But at the time, I was really into heavy metal, and Metallica was, I don't think really that popular because we didn't have the resources that we have now, right? We didn't have social media, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have, camera phones and all these ways to communicate. We had MTV and we had magazines, and I used to buy like heavy metal magazines, and you'd see their pictures, and that's how you learned about these bands by like listening to the radio and once in a while. And Metallica really wasn't, I mean, I don't know if you know or you remember, you're younger than me, but they didn't play Metallica on the radio that often back then when they first came out, as they became a little more mainstream, they did. But what was popular was like the hair bands like Motley Crue and Van Halen and Poison and Cinderella and Bon Jovi. And I really was into them too. And I really liked those bands, and I'd love to go see them in concert. And I think one thing that I remember that was significant to me that I always tell people is I remember like watching MTV and seeing like the Van Halen drummer who had like 200 drums. He had like those little drums. He had the big bong thing in the back, and then seeing like Tommy Lee, who had like the drum cage that spun in the air, and you'd see this on MTV, and you'd see like all these theatrics, and these guys had so many drums. And then I remember like not seeing Metallica, but hearing Metallica like on the radio, or a friend had a tape or whatever, and hearing like how fast the music was played and like the bass drums. And I remember being like, imagine how many drums that guy must have to play that music that way. Because I was thinking of like what I saw on TV, on MTV, and how many drums these people had, and then you hear them and you're like, wow, this music is so much more intense. And then I remember going to see him in concert, and he just had like a small little drum kit. I'm like, how do they do that? How do they play the music that fast and that intense and make it sound so good? But they're just really good musicians.
When was the first time you saw the band? Was the Field House the first time you saw Metallica, or had you seen them previously?
That was the first time I saw them like live, in concert. But I don't remember I remember like the magazines, the heavy metal magazines, and seeing their pictures and stuff. But I don't remember like too many videos of them on MTV. There were a few, but you really had to like sit through the Headbangers Ball and, catch them.
So it's funny you say that they weren't super popular, because this show was just only 3 or 4 weeks, maybe even less than that, from when they lost the first ever heavy metal Grammy Award to Jethro Tull.
Yeah.
And they performed on television, like national television that night, and lost.
Yeah.
So
I do remember that. Yeah.
They had, right. So they had kind of, they were very much in the mainstream, but you're right. They weren't like popular like we know Metallica to be today, which is just, selling out Giant Stadium 2 nights in a row,
Right.
completely floor to ceiling, full. What so you said you became a fan after you sort of like heard their music somewhere. What did a friend of yours have a tape or something?
I remember like my little group of heavy metal friends, we all had like our, Poison shirts and Bon Jovi and, Cinderella, like those kind of groups, And there was like another group, there was all these little subgroups of friends, these cliques that were into that music. And then there was like the groups of kids that had like the Slayer shirts and Iron Maiden and Metallica, and and it was like those kids were like the bad kids. They were like we were like scared of them. We're like, whoa, that guy's got that guy has an overkill shirt on, or some crazy like speed metal group that you're just like, those guys got to be on drugs or something. Like I just remember thinking like those were the wild kids. But we just kind of slowly transitioned into those because it really wasn't cool to listen to Poison anymore, as time went on and that music became more popular. So it was that's what I remember about that time. And I think, yeah, I started hearing like other friends had a tape and you'd listen to it and it was, it was addictive. The music was so good. It was just like, wow, this is really, really good.
Yeah, that's what drew me to the band. And I'm only 10 or 11 years younger than you. And the first time I saw the band, I was 17, even though I got into them when I was 15. I feel like everybody finds their favorite band, or at least starts to get into music when they're like 14 or 15. It's kind of like when music becomes like a important part of your life as a kid. And I saw them at Giant Stadium 2003, July 2003 at Giant Stadium, East Rutherford, New Jersey, for the Summer Sanitarium Tour. And that was the first tour back for the band after like Saint Anger had come out, and the band, like James Hetfield, had come out of rehab, and it was that whole, and they got a new bass player, Rob Trujillo. Yep. And so it was like, for me, it was super exciting because for everybody, the band hadn't played live in like a number of years, and it was a big outdoor summer festival. And that was what was so exciting for me as a 17-year-old. It was like this, I remember how like palpable the energy was, like going to my first like big show to see my favorite band with like what appeared to be like, it wasn't 100,000 people, but it felt like 100,000 people.
Yeah. The word you've said there, the energy, that's like the perfect word that sums it up, because the crowds would be wild. I'm sure you remember like they would get really amped up and excited, and mosh pits, and the people were going wild. But it seems to be I've seen them recently like a few times, and the show they put on is so good. I feel like they put so much energy and effort into their performance. Like they really care. Like the screens that they don't just put like a big screen behind them so that everybody can see. They'll put like the whole stadium or wherever they are filled with screens that are like round, so you can see them from every angle. And I look up at this stuff and I'm like, this had to be millions of dollars to put this together, because like I mentioned earlier on, like I go to hip hop shows too, and they look like I really like that music also, but they look like they put in no effort into like their stage. Like sometimes I'm like, did you even practice for this? You know what I mean? Like, but like the way that Metallica puts on a show, it's like I can see why they've been so, long-standing and popular for so long. They really care and put in the effort, and it's incredible. And when you watch them, the intensity of each one of them individually, like they don't just stand there like playing their instrument. They are like rock musicians to the core, and they play the part, and I think that's so cool.
And that's kind of to bring it back to the 89 show, the one in Troy. At the time, they were touring for what was the And Justice for All album, which had come out, actually, I believe it was August or September, August of 1988. So we're recording this right now. What is it? Today's August 1st. So it was 35 years ago this month, right, that the album had come out. And so the stage show at the time was the And Justice for All theme. I think it was Damaged Justice was the tour name. And yes, so they had the big giant Justice statue, yep, with the scales and the pyro and the big steps. And at the end of the show, the statue, I think, fell apart. It was like, I think, right, it was during one, everything started blowing up and the statue breaks apart, which was, was that kind of exciting to when you're in the room seeing that happen, with to be surrounded by other people who are just as rabidly excited about it as you are?
Well, yeah, I remember there being a lot of like pyrotechnics and like, like I said, they put a lot of effort into their stage presence, and it's not like it's not corny by any means. Like, some of the groups that they went over the top, like Kiss, and they did like kind of made it into a circus. Like Metallica's show is really like you're like you can't take your eyes off of it or your ears off of it.
It feels dangerous to a certain degree.
Exactly. And it's funny you say that, because what that thing that they had on the just the scales and everything that they had on the stage that fell apart, like I think something happened with the pyro stuff that like part of it caught on fire. And I remember probably like 2 or 3 times throughout the show thinking like, was that supposed to happen? And I think that's like what they wanted to do. Like I think they wanted something so dangerous to like fall or something to catch on fire for the crowd to be like, whoa, that wasn't supposed to happen, but it probably was. It was part of the show.
What do you remember about finding out about the show? And what was that like, purchasing the tickets? You remember how much they were? Who'd you go to the show with?
I remember I went to the show with a friend of mine from high school who was one of those kids that, wore the Slayer shirts that I was like so intimidated by. But he was in one of my classes and he was like a really cool, funny kid. And he's like, hey, you want to go to the concert? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And I don't remember how much the tickets were. I don't remember a lot of the details. I think my dad drove us there, dropped us off. Who's looking at the people and was like, everybody had long hair back then. And he's like, these people are all on drugs. I think he was thinking that we were like, he was going to drop us off and he's going to pick us up and we were going to be drug addicts or something. But, I look at the kids now and the way they dress and stuff. And I'm just like, man, what's the matter with these kids? And then I look at like pictures from back then with everybody's hair, and the girls, their hair was so high and poofed up. And I'm just like, man, they look just as crazy. We look just as crazy back then as these kids do now, just in a different way. So yeah, I don't remember a lot of the details other than there was a lot of people and it was a big deal, but it was cool. It was a good time for sure.
Did you go to a lot of shows at the Field House, or did you go to a lot of concerts in general when you were younger?
I didn't, but I do remember my first concert that I went to was actually Bon Jovi and Cinderella opened up, and that was also at the RPI Field House, and that was sold out. And I do remember buying the tickets for that because I think my parents let me take the day off of school to buy the tickets.
Wow.
And the teachers like found out and they were like, you took a day off of school to buy concert tickets, but like if you weren't there, you had to, back in those days, for people that are listening, that are maybe a lot younger, you had to go to a place,
Right.
Ticketmaster, stand in line, and you had to get there early. And some people used to have tents and they would go the day before and they'd sleep there. I didn't do that, but I remember getting there really early to buy the Bon Jovi tickets, and that sold out like the first hour. And I got in that was Living on a Prayer tour when he flew across the stage with the rope, which at the time was like so state of the art. You see the stuff they do now, but they just like had a rope and a pulley and they like hung him across the crowd. And it was like, wow, he's flying, it's so funny how things have changed. But, no, I wasn't a big crazy concert goer, but that I did see Metallica a few other times. I saw them in Woodstock when they came to our area. I think it was, what was that when Woodstock came, like 99 or something?
There was Woodstock 94 and Woodstock
94.
99.
Yeah, I think it was 94 was the one that I went to. It was like real muddy. I just remember, and there was like there was probably like 30 or 40 bands that played, and I just went to see them. And me and my friend at the time, I remember walking up through the crowd, and the crowd was very like, because it was in such a big open field, the crowd was very like sparsely, there was a lot of people, but you could like walk in between the people. And I remember we got really close, and then it started getting wild. Like the crowd started moving, like sway. The people started to pack in as the music got more intense. The people just stood closer together, and then it would start like waving back and forth, and you're like, wow, this is scary. We gotta get out of here.
Right, because at that point you are completely out of control. If the concert goes, if the crowd goes one way or the other, you just got to go with them.
There's nothing, you can't get out. Right.
Right. First time listener to the show? It's okay. We won't tell. Don't forget to check out past episodes of Troy Story, a podcast for the Collar City, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and everywhere podcasts are available. You can also explore our full archive at troystorypod.com. I've been watching the show myself periodically, going back, and I know that you said you looked at it too. But does any particular moment from the show stand out to you in your mind? I know you said you can't remember much of it, but I was just curious to know if you remember one particular moment. You mentioned the pyro. If there was anything else or a particular song perhaps that jumped out at you in your memories?
I don't think so. I think at that time that was like when they had a music video, which like we spoke about earlier, they didn't have a lot of back then, but that's when I think was it One that came out, and that was like a really popular video. And the crowd went crazy when that song came on. I think that's what it was. But
I think yes, that was their music video. It was like the black and white, their first
exactly.
ever music
Yeah.
video.
Yep. And other than that, no, I just remember it being a lot of people and very intense, much more intense and kind of like scary, like than the Bon Jovi concert, that's for sure. It was like, this is a much cooler crowd. These people are, these people are tougher.
Did you know that 2 or 3 songs of the show filmed professionally that exist? And I think it's on YouTube. Someone may have posted it. Like
really? No, I didn't know that. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, there's like a pirated clip that somebody pulled and put it up on YouTube. I'm not endorsing pirating anything,
right,
but
right.
I was curious to know if you had seen it.
Kind of like our hometown show. I should check that out.
It's pretty good. Like the sound quality is really good, and it's I think it may be 2 cameras. It's from the back, so you see the crowd. It just looks it's obviously better professionally filmed than the guy with the camcorder stage right, up in the rafters. There's actually a really funny moment in that bootleg video of the person filming. It's right at the beginning of Sanitarium, and there, the song starts with the clean. Fans will know it starts with that clean guitar, like dang, 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 and you hear this voice come through, goes, "Hey, let me get a copy of that," and he's talking to the guy.
That's funny.
He's talking to the guy who's filming. Yeah, it happens very quickly. If you weren't paying attention, you'd miss it. But I noticed I was listening with headphones and I caught it.
Yeah, it's cool that the whole thing is on on YouTube like that, because it's like over, it's like 2 hours of a whole concert that somebody stood there, like you said, with a camcorder, and then somehow today it's on YouTube.
Right, and a bunch of other concerts from that era, especially heavy metal concerts. Iron Maiden at the Field House. I think 2 different shows of Iron Maiden at the Field House. Slayer at the Field House. I'm fairly certain the person that filmed the Metallica show is at least the same person who filmed the Slayer show, because throughout I shouldn't say throughout, but at key moments in the Metallica concert, the Metallica logo pops up on the screen, and it was added very clearly. The technology was of the era, like someone went through and recreated the logo and adds it in. And the same thing happens in the Slayer bootleg. Someone filmed the whole concert.
It must have been the same person.
It had to have been the same person, yeah. So I have never, I'd love to find out who filmed it, because clearly whoever it was, they handed it off to somebody to post on YouTube. And it's been on YouTube for at least 10 or 12 years, so it's not...
I never thought to look at it until I, talked to you about talking about the show. I'm like, I wonder if I'd look it up, if there's anything about it. And sure enough...
The whole thing, the whole show from start to finish. Yeah. Real quickly, so you mentioned the set list, and I brought this up here. So the set list was Blackened, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Welcome Home Sanitarium, Harvester of Sorrow, Eye of the Beholder, Master of Puppets, One, Seek and Destroy, and Justice for All. And then they did 2 encores, which was pretty standard for Metallica back then, which was Creeping Death, Fade to Black, and Battery. And then they did a second encore, which was Last Caress, the Misfits song. Then Am I Evil? And then the Whiplash was the closer. So it's funny that because it was 1989, it was only the first 4 albums. It kind of represents that early era of Metallica, just those first 4 albums. And I think for a lot of people, they probably see that set list and go, man, I wish I could have been at that show. It's like,
yes, because that's the best is yeah.
Right. The best, quote unquote, but it's like all their classic stuff. You know what I mean? Which again, it's pretty cool. But in hindsight, yes, you could say that. But when you're there, you're just there to see Metallica. You're one of your favorite bands, so you're not thinking about the best albums, because there were no newer albums than that moment.
Right. I do remember, though, even though I was kind of like a new fan at that time, because I would listen to that other music that I talked about earlier for so long, and then just kind of started listening to Metallica. But I remember I knew all those songs, like I learned them quickly, and I like knew all the words. I remember that.
Yeah, and that was kind of the era too of '89. They were doing they would put a lot of those covers, especially Am I Evil, because that was one they were playing for a while. I think even earlier. Why am I blanking on Am I Evil? Oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Yes, I know it. Diamond Head. That's who did the original.
Yeah.
And because they were playing that, I think for a long time as like the cover.
Right. Yeah, I do remember also that they were really good with the lighting. Like whoever did the lighting knew what they were doing. You could tell like everything was very professional in their shows, not just at the RPI show, but all of their shows that I've seen. Everybody must be like the best of the best, because they're lighting people. It's really dark when you enter the arena, and it's, dark throughout most of the show, and the lights come on, you can see the stage. And then like at the end, like the one show, which was not the RPI show, but one show that I went to where they did play like the fast version of Seek and Destroy, like at the end, they turn on all the lights in the arena. So like you're at this, you're in an arena for a couple hours and it's all dark. You can see the people that are close to you and you can kind of see things. But when they turn on, they light up the whole inside of the arena. It's like crazy looking. You look around and you're like, wow, look at all these people. And
my favorite part of the '89 video, because I've watched it a few times now, because it's just so cool. One, that it exists, and two, it captures that entire moment. Is the second song, For Whom the Bell Tolls, because the audience, the lights come on, just like you explained. The lights are so bright, and the person running the camcorder backs out. He or she, we don't know who it is, zooms all the way out, and you see the crowd. And so they're playing this song, and the crowd is just going ballistic.
Right.
Like you can see the arms, everybody's just like pumping. I mean, it looks like this sea of moving bodies and people, and it was really cool to see that moment. And again, that entire show is captured, that all those people there who were at that show, however many thousands of people it was, there's a permanent memorialization of that show that they were at. And not everybody can say that, a lot of shows get bootlegged over the years. A lot of times some are probably just sitting on a tape somewhere in a closet, degrading, but that one isn't. It's digitized and it's on YouTube,
that is cool.
Like what you're hearing? Share the love and leave a review. According to the internet, we're told reviews are the most effective way to help suggest our podcast to other listeners. Oh, and please share this episode with your friends, family, or that special person in your life. They'll thank you for it, and we will be forever in your debt. Troy Story, a podcast for the Collar City. Catch new episodes each month on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, and everywhere pods are cast.
But I was listening to a really recent interview with Lars. I think it might have been on Howard Stern or something, where he was talking about how like he was asking them about like things of theirs that get copied or bootlegged, and he was pretty cool about it. He's like, it's really the best form of flattery when somebody copies your song. They said that they put out songs now where they just put like something out on the internet, and like a week later they see like another band, like a cover band that had done that song that they just made, and that band is like a Japanese band in Japan. You know what I mean? And they're like, and he's like, they're so good at it. They're like better than we are. And this is like Lars saying this. He's like, so that's like really like, it's like the greatest compliment when somebody like copies what you do. And it's amazing how many bands there are now that do covers of their songs, and some of them are really good, you know. And they're all over the world. That's what he was saying. He like, they're in like Australia. Like we were, they release a song, and then like somebody in Australia like copies is singing the song and knows all the words,
learns how to play it on guitar and
Yeah.
uploads himself playing it on YouTube within like a couple hours of the song coming out.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is a degree of skill that's very impressive.
Absolutely. Yeah.
As a guitar player, I'm impressed by that. One, because I don't have enough time to sit down and do anything, let alone sit down and learn a whole song.
I understand, because I tried to play guitar when I was younger, and I tried, there's a lot of songs that they teach to play. I'm like, I want to learn how to like play Metallica, and it was so hard. It was just like I gave up because I was like, there's no way I could ever do that. They're really talented musicians.
Speaking of the openers, I know we touched on earlier. Do you remember who the opener was? Queensrÿche?
I do remember that it was Queensrÿche, but I don't remember. I wasn't like a big fan of theirs. I know they had that, a couple popular songs, but I don't really remember them. I think I just kind of wanted it to be over, and it's like I just want to hear, I just want to hear Metallica.
Thank you very much. We're gonna end here with saying thank you for coming out. It's just beginning, so stick around. We're gonna end here with side 2 of Operation Minecraft and a song called Eyes of a Stranger.
If you go on, I'm actually going to pull it up here because I want to get your reactions. I have it up on my phone right now, just specifically for this. So there's a lot of comments on here, and let's see. There's a couple. There was one about Queensrÿche I wanted to read to you. But here's some good ones. Cameraman knew what he was doing. He knew where to pan the camera at the right direction at the right time. Lars drum solo during Battery. Lady Justice falling. Amazing. And this is somebody who commented on this video 6 days ago. People are still commenting.
Watching it. That is crazy. I guess, when I heard about your podcast, I'm like, is anybody going to want to like hear about the RPI Field House concert? And then, like what you just said, somebody commented on that video 6 days ago. Yeah, I guess they do, because if you look at the amount of views on YouTube that video got, it's, still in demand. So that's cool.
Here's another person who said 4 years ago, said, "Damn, I was there. Too bad you didn't have the Queensrÿche footage too." and then someone responded and said, "Me too. Was amazing." Here goes someone similar to your age about. This was 11 months ago. I was at this show. First Metallica concert, 9th grade. 2 things stood out to me. When they played For Whom the Bell Tolls at the beginning, Jason's bass was so loud it made my teeth vibrate, and it also made the bottom of my jeans vibrate against my ankles. I've never heard anything close to that since then, and I've been to many concerts.
So, go take some time right now and introduce the guy who plays the bass and shit. Fucking introduce to you Mr. Jason Newkid. Okay, let's hear it.
That's funny that somebody can remember that much detail of like the,
Well, it's like when you watch the concert, I was curious to know if that the video would help jog any of your memories. I mean, it's obviously very jilted. It's from a camcorder from up in one corner of the arena. But, you know, sometimes when I go back and look at old footage of like me performing with some of my college bands, I'm immediately taken back to that show. I'm like, I remember that. I remember those people, or I see somebody's face, or I remember something happening. It kind of like jogs my memory and brings me back to that very moment. So I was curious to know if the video had helped stir up any of those other sort of like memories.
Video not so much, but that comment you just read about how like the bass and the vibration, that does make me remember like how intense it was, because it wasn't just like a mixture of all these instruments being played and it's just like a mosh of music. It was like you really, like every one of them, like the drummer was so intense, you know, the bass was so intense, the guitar, every one of them, you're like, that guy is so good, you know. And it's like incredible, you know. It's really like, and I guess that's why we're fans, because you watch and you can appreciate how good they are compared to like, you know, other bands that you may have seen. They're like just really good at what they do, and I think every one of their instruments really stands out. Like that guy talking about the bass, how like it was like so intense, and it is, you know, because sometimes the bass just gets buried in the song and you don't realize that it's even being played because it's not as like prominent as like the guitar is.
Right.
But you know, when you're at the concert and you can hear it, you're like, oh my God, that guy is really like a big part of this show, you know. So that's interesting.
Here's another good one from 1 year ago. My buddies and I drove up from Columbia County and waited overnight in our cars to get tickets. At the show, some of them got thrown out for moshing. It wasn't quite a thing at metal shows at the time, and the bouncers thought they were fighting. Great fucking show for those of us who didn't get the boot.
That's funny. Yeah.
And there's and then there's all these people who are responding. You know, people are commenting back and forth. It's just really, it's really great to see all these people. Again, the show kind of goes online and all these people stumble upon it. And it's just really cool to see people chiming in saying, I was there 3 years ago. And someone actually wrote, hey man, you got the Queensrÿche footage? And he said, nope, sorry.
That's funny.
Yeah. So there's a lot of cool stuff. And it's actually, someone else uploaded it and there's other comments too, but I think this is the one that has more views. So there's more comments on it, but it's pretty cool. Pretty cool moment. Is there anything else that you remember that you just want to share?
I don't think so. I mean, again, it was a long time ago, you know, and I really think that it wasn't so much the show in particular that I remember, but the time frame and like how crazy the music seemed to be to people that were not into it. You know, I remember like, and I don't know if you remember this, but one thing that stands out in my memory is how people would like call it like devil worshiping music, and they thought we were like, you know, Satanists and worshiping the devil. And if you like look back at it now, how silly all of that was. But it was, you know, these guys are just professional entertainers, and they have to make, not just Metallica, but other heavy metal bands had to make their music dark and scary, and you know, that was the theme of it all, and it made it cool. And you know, if you look back at it now as an adult, you're like, that's kind of silly. Like nobody was worshiping the devil, really. You know what I mean? But that's how it seemed to people like from the outside that weren't into it. They're like, these people are crazy, you know.
That, and the band was still really young at the time too. They weren't 40-year-old men.
Right,
you know?
Right. And that's what I think about now as I get, you know, I'm almost going to be 50 years old. I'm like, wow, these guys were really young then, you know, like they weren't that much older than I was. You know, I was 14, but they were like 22, you know, and which really is not a big age difference. It is when you're 14 years old. You're like, wow, these are grown adults up there, you know, like, but they were like young kids, and they were really good, and you know, at the top of their game, and still are, to see them now and how intense they play. And they're in their, you know, 60s, I would assume, you know, so they're really keeping it together like no other group, really. Maybe like the Rolling Stones, but you know, they still tour and travel and make new music. It's pretty impressive.
That's what the difference is. Yes, the Rolling Stones are still around, but a band like Metallica that is still touring in their early 60s and still putting out new records, but playing the old stuff to a degree of intensity and professionalism and speed that the Rolling Stones didn't have thrash metal songs,
Right, it's true. Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's a little easier to play the
your song. Yeah. Yeah.
So the riff to Satisfaction is not the riff to like Fight Fire with Fire or
right.
or Blackened,
Yeah, all while banging your head the entire time back and forth with your hair going back. Like to see Rob the bassist is so intense watching him play. It's like if you were to look up, rock star in the dictionary, it should be that guy. The way he stands and everything about him. The bass player is so cool. I think that's the definition of like rock and roll. Like it's so intense.
On the topic of bass, do you remember this was the first album tour with Jason Newsted, who replaced Cliff Burton, the original bass player who was killed while they were touring for the previous album. Was that something you were aware of at the time? If you were a consumer of, I'm assuming, what was it, like Circus Magazine? And
yes, that was a big one, and I think Hit Parade was the other one. But yeah, I remember that, and I don't remember it being. I do remember it at the time, but I don't remember being that big of a deal. I think it's just like, oh, this is the new guy, But now looking back at history like that, Cliff was really like an integral part of, those historic songs that are still so popular today. And, he was really, really talented. You didn't realize it, until many years afterwards. But yeah, that's when the Jason guy was I think one of his early shows. And, the fact that he left is crazy, to me, but I guess he just, wanted to do other things,
And that was funny because that was right after I had gotten into the band, and then he I remember, this will date me as well for someone who's like I just turned 39. So we were in high school in the computer lab, and that was how we got the internet back then. We didn't have we had high speed internet at school. We had dial up at home. And just going on MTV and just be like, MTV News, and just like, Jason Newsted quit Metallica? I was like,
yeah, yeah. Like, what are you gonna do now? Like, were you gonna go to something better? Like, what are you gonna do now? I guess they were pretty tough on him. I mean, hearing what he had to say afterwards. They just didn't fit in, and that can't be fun to go to, like, even though your job is being a famous rock star, which is everyone's dream probably, to go in every day and you don't get along, or the other guys don't, appreciate you. It's got to be kind of crappy.
Yeah, hazing sucks.
Yeah.
Hazing sucks. Yeah. I think that's it. I don't know if you have anything else, that you feel.
I wish I could contribute more, but that's my memory's going in my old age. I can't remember much more about it.
Cool. Well, thank you for doing this. Seriously, this was really awesome.
No problem. Thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to hearing your show, and I appreciate you keeping the dream alive.
A very big thank you to Kevin for sharing his heavy metal memories from Metallica's 1989 concert at RPI's Houston Field House in Troy. It was really great to hear Kevin slowly peel back the layers of time on this unique musical moment in Collar City history. Were you at the Metallica show at the RPI Field House? Or did you see other concerts at the Field House in Troy? Send us an email with your memories to mail@troystorypod.com. That's mail@troystorypod.com. If you haven't yet, please give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to Troy Story. This is very helpful for getting others to hear our show. All right, I'm going to leave you now with a clip from our upcoming episode with Eric Haskins, RPI class of 91, who takes us back to his time working as a security guard at the Field House during the late 80s and early 90s, including Metallica's first and only Troy show.
There was this room upstairs in the Field House off to the side, and this is now Metallica's in there to meet these fans that have these after show things. So on my way there, I ripped the dressing room sign off of the door of Metallica's dressing room bold move for, a kid who wants to keep his $10 an hour job. But I'm like, all right, I'm taking this.
Until next time, love yourself, love one another, and may Pod save Troy. Troy Story, a podcast for the Collar City, is hosted, written, edited, and produced by me, John Salka. Our theme music is by Stephen J. Goldman at Four Legs Records. Like what you heard? Please give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to Troy Story, a podcast for the Collar City. This is incredibly helpful for getting others to find our show. Want to know more? Visit TroyStoryPod.com to see upcoming episodes, guests, and bonus content. Thanks for listening. The views or opinions expressed by guests are their own and not of the host or Troy Story, a podcast for the Collar City.